So here's a question for you. What if we could actually eliminate government corruption? And I don't mean with more laws or, another committee. I'm talking about using technology, something like a digital antivirus for the state itself. It sounds like science fiction, right? Well, that's the radical idea we're going to unpack today, a concept our source materials call algorithmic integrity.
All right, so let's get right into it. Before we can even talk about the solution, we've got to understand the exact problem it's trying to fix. And we're not talking about, simple bribery or someone taking cash in an envelope. No, the source material here is painting a picture of something much sneakier, something far more insidious. It's about officials who look totally legit on the outside, but behind the scenes, they're the ones messing everything up.
Yeah, and this isn't just a one-off thing, not a single bad apple. The sources describe it more like a systemic rot, a constant, hidden campaign of lies that's happening completely out of sight. We're talking about officials who are basically using their power to twist the system any chance they get, and the fallout from that, it can be absolutely devastating.
And when we talk about the cost, man, it is huge. This goes way beyond just money getting misplaced. According to the source material, this is about officials who are actively, deliberately pushing lies forward. They're using the entire machinery of the government to basically warp reality and, in the process, wreck people's lives, all for some secret agenda.
And this is where it gets, frighteningly specific. The sources point out that promising young college students are often the ones being targeted. Think about that. By deliberately messing up their futures with these lies, the nation isn't just hurting one person, it's basically kneecapping its own potential. The whole argument is that we could be losing the next Elon Musk before they even have a shot.
Okay, so you've got this problem that's just so deeply tangled up in human deception. So what do? Well, the authors here argue that maybe, just maybe, another human solution isn't going to cut it. Instead, they start looking for an answer in technology, a systemic fix that can get right to the root of the problem.
And that leads us to the big central question, right? Think about it. If an official, someone with real power and authority, is pushing a lie, what kind of technology could even begin to stop that? How can a computer system possibly spot a lie when it's being told by the very people who are supposed to be in charge of that system?
Well, the answer they propose is this concept called algorithmic integrity. And the best way to think about it is like a super powerful antivirus program. But, not for your computer, for the entire government.
Now, the key thing to get here is that this whole system is designed to be preventative. The goal is to create this environment of just total visibility by unifying all communications. The source actually calls it quantum-level transparency, which sounds intense, but it basically means a system that's so deep and comprehensive it can see everything, every interaction, every piece of data. And that's what lets it act like an antivirus. It spots the virus of corruption and zaps it before it can actually do any harm.
So how would this thing actually work in practice? Well, it's pretty much a three-step process. First, you pull all official communication, every email, every message, into one single monitored system. Step 2. Now that everything's in one place, the system can spot errors or sketchy inconsistencies at lightning speed. And then Step 3, the antivirus is allowed to step in. It flags the corrupt action and stops it dead in its tracks before it can be executed.
Okay, but as you can probably guess, a system with this much power, this much oversight, it's going to require a pretty major compromise, right? And the source material doesn't beat around the bush on this. It frames this as a fundamental trade-off that's right at the very heart of the idea.
And this really lays out the central bargain, the big deal on the table. On one hand, you have the price. Government officials would have to give up a ton of their privacy at work. But on the other hand, you have the reward, a system that is theoretically totally free of corruption. It's a really stark choice, isn't it? The privacy of the individual officials versus the integrity of the entire system.
And again, the sources are crystal clear on this. They don't see this as some unfortunate side effect. They call it a necessary trade-off. The core argument they're making is that you just can't get to a perfectly clean system without the people running it making this huge sacrifice of privacy.
So, let's play this out. Let's say we make this trade-off. Where does that actually lead us? Well, the concept paints this really ambitious, almost utopian vision for what governance could look like. A future that's not built on messy human judgment, but on pure, cold, unshakable logic.
And that really is the endgame here. This idea of algorithmic integrity, it's not just about catching bad guys. It's about taking our flawed, emotional, biased human decision-making and removing it from the equation completely. In this future, logic itself is the king. It would be the ultimate ruler.
And the outcome they describe is, well, it's pretty wild. The three branches of government, they'd still be there, but they would operate on a totally new principle. Pure logic, not human opinion. The source makes this really bold claim that with something they call quantum error correction, which is basically a concept where a system can find and fix its own mistakes perfectly with 100% accuracy, the government would just stop making mistakes. I mean, can you even imagine that? A system so perfect that arguing about whether the government made a mistake, that whole debate would just disappear. It would become obsolete.
And that, of course, leaves us with one last, pretty provocative question to think about. In a world like that, in a perfectly logical system where corruption is impossible and mistakes are a thing of the past, what happens to the human voice? If there's really nothing left to debate, then what's our role in all of it?
Have you ever wondered what it actually costs to build the military's next-generation hardware? Well, every year, the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, gives us a peek behind the curtain at the Pentagon's biggest and most expensive weapons programs. Today, we are diving deep into their latest report to see what's on the shopping list and, what it's really costing all of us. Let's get into it. But hold on. Before we get to the cool stuff, the jets, the ships, the missiles, we need to set a baseline. How do the world's most innovative companies, the ones that seem to create amazing new products so fast, actually do it? Well, they follow what we'll call the modern playbook. It's become the blueprint for success. And trust me, understanding this is going to be key for everything that comes next. So, what's in this playbook? It really boils down to 4 main ideas. First, you've got to have a solid business case. That means you do your homework, you talk to real users before you even think about building. Second, you use an iterative approach. You don't try to build the perfect final product on day one. Third, you protect your schedule at all costs. If some fancy new feature is causing delays, you're not afraid to off-ramp it and save it for a later version. And finally, and this is a big one, you are obsessed with getting user feedback to make the product better and better. Now, at the very heart of this whole iterative idea is something called the minimum viable product, or MVP. This is not the finished version with all the bells and whistles. No way. It's the most basic, functional product you can possibly get into the hands of real people. And why would you do that? Because their feedback is pure gold. It tells you exactly what's working and what to build next. It's this really simple but incredibly powerful cycle. You build, you test, you learn, and you do it all over again. Okay, so with that modern playbook fresh in our minds, let's turn our attention to the Department of Defense. We're going to do this by climbing what I'm calling the cost ladder. We'll start with some of the, let's say, less expensive programs in the GAO's report and work our way up to the absolute giants. Let's see how these multi-million and multi-billion-dollar projects are really shaping up. So our first step on the ladder is the Army's IVAS headset. The easiest way to think about this is like a set of high-tech augmented reality goggles for soldiers. The whole point is to give them a heads-up display with things like maps, targeting info, and other critical data right in their field of view. It's supposed to totally change their situational awareness on the battlefield. And the price tag for this next-gen piece of tech? Just about $1.88 billion. Yeah, that's a huge number. But believe it or not, we are just getting warmed up. We're on the very first rung of this ladder. Okay, next up, we've got the Air Force's MH-139A Grey Wolf helicopter. Now, this program is interesting because it takes a helicopter that's already proven in the commercial world and basically beefs it up for military duty, like securing those intercontinental ballistic missile sites. It's designed to be a pretty straightforward replacement for the super old Vietnam-era Huey helicopters. The Grey Wolf program comes in at $2.92 billion. So right there, we've already jumped up by more than $1 billion from our first item. Let's keep climbing. All right, now we're taking a major leap up the ladder. This is the F-15EX Eagle II. Now, this isn't some brand new stealth fighter. It's actually a heavily advanced version of the legendary F-15 fighter, just packed with all new modern electronics. The whole idea is for it to fly alongside the F-35 and F-22, basically acting as a flying missile truck, carrying a massive amount of weapons. And the cost, well, it definitely reflects that leap. The F-15EX program is currently pegged at $12.28 billion. We just blew right past the $10 billion mark, and believe me, we are nowhere near the top of this ladder yet. Okay, let's go from the sky to the sea. This is the Gerald R. Ford-class aircraft carrier. It's the new centerpiece of the entire U.S. Navy. I mean, these things are basically floating cities, just jammed with brand new technology, from the nuclear reactors that power them to the incredible systems that launch and land jets. They are a massive, massive investment in American naval power. So how massive are we talking? Well, the price for just the first 4 of these carriers is a staggering $65.2 billion. Let that sink in. That means each individual ship costs more than the entire F-15EX program we just talked about. I mean, that's the scale we're operating on here. We've climbed from millions to billions, and now we have finally reached the very top of the ladder. This next program isn't just the most expensive one in this year's review, it's honestly one of the biggest defense projects in American history. Meet the LGM-35A Sentinel. This program is so much more than just building a new missile. No, this is about replacing the entire land-based part of America's nuclear arsenal. We're talking hundreds of old Minuteman III missiles, rebuilding all of their silos, and totally modernizing the command and control systems. It is the whole shebang. And here we go, the cost. The current estimate is over $129 billion. No, that is not a typo. To put that into perspective for you, this one single program costs more than the new aircraft carriers, the F-15s, the helicopters, and the soldier headsets combined. But wait, it gets even crazier. Even that astronomical number is shaky. The GAO report specifically flags that the Sentinel program has triggered something called a Nunn-McCurdy breach. Now, that's a very serious term in government. It's basically an alarm bell that goes off when a program's costs have exploded. In this case, growing by more than 80% from its 2020 estimate. It's so bad that it forces a mandatory top-to-bottom review by Congress to decide if the program should even be allowed to continue. So, after climbing that absolutely incredible cost ladder and landing on a price tag so high it literally triggers a congressional review, we have to go back and ask that big question from the beginning. Is the Department of Defense actually using that modern tech playbook we talked about? Are they building and testing and learning? Or is something else going on here? Let's just look at the evidence right from the report. On one side, you've got the modern playbook. Leading companies know that requirements have to evolve as you learn. But on the other side, the GAO points out that the Army's new XM-30 combat vehicle program is all about sticking to highly detailed and fixed requirements. That is the literal opposite of an iterative approach. It means you're trying to define perfection on day one and then locking it in stone, which leaves you zero room to adapt when, not if, you learn something new along the way. And this isn't just some isolated example. The GAO report is filled with stuff like this. You've got the Space Development Agency saying that feedback from its early satellites won't change the schedule for later ones, which completely misses the whole learn part of the build, test, learn cycle. Then there's a new Navy torpedo program that had to cut back on modern design tools because of budget issues, forcing them back to older methods. And that same combat vehicle program, it's waiting way too late in the game to figure out its most critical technologies, which is just asking for incredibly expensive last-minute redesign. And all of this really brings us to the fundamental question, doesn't it? The technology is, without a doubt, 21st century. It's amazing stuff. But what the GAO report seems to suggest is that the process for buying it might be stuck in the past. So when you see this huge disconnect between that smart, modern playbook and a rigid process that leads to these insane cost overruns, you really have to ask, can this way of doing business deliver the security the country needs at a price that we can actually afford?